Hi, welcome back. So for years, all I knew was the minor pentatonic scale, so I only ever had 5 notes to play with. I thought I was dead clever once I'd learnt the major and minor and all associated modes, and then I had 7 notes to play with. Nowadays, I choose to regard myself as having all 12 notes available to me all of the time. Let's talk about that. So can I draw your attention to the key moments menu in the description? It might be that you'd just like to skip ahead straight to the chord mentioned in the title, or to the scales and theory bit. Just be aware that that's there and you can skip at any point. I'm going to start today's video with a discussion around how I approach improvising and ear training. If, like me, your interests lie in making stuff up and single note improvisation, then hopefully this is for you. Everything opened up for me when I began looking into George Russell's seminal work, The Lydian Chromatic Concept of Tonal Organisation. The key concept that I think I've taken from that is the concept of tonal gravity. It's the suggestion that all notes revolve around a tonal centre, simply providing more or less tension at any given moment. The idea that all 12 notes are available, not just 7 or 5 or whatever. And that's now how I regard it. I regard it as like a circle, and all notes are in that circle. At the centre of the circle is either the root note or maybe the third of the chord that's been played, assuming there is a chord being played. The notes that are being played in the backing, they're the safe notes, they're closest to the centre of the circle. And then as you get further out to the edges of the circle, they're the notes that create the most tension. And that's it really. It's not kind of rocket science, but it was a huge shift for me to start regarding all notes as being available, instead of like, this is my scale, this is all I can play. The notes, there are no-go notes. Whenever you think in terms of, oh, this is the scale I can play, that means there are no-go notes. And I'm wanting you to consider the possibility that there are no-go notes. Some notes really are handled with care. Some notes you might only use as a passing tone. But they're all available all of the time. That's what I'm hoping you might get from this video. My end game is to improvise freely and by ear. I have spent some amount of time considering various theories, and I'm really not into jazz much. I mean, I don't dislike it, but I've watched an awful lot of videos about playing jazz. I don't want to be thinking a lot when I'm playing, and I don't generally in life like rules-based approaches, should we put it that way. Yeah, enough said. So my approach to achieving that end game of being able to improvise freely and by ear is mostly around training my ear. So if all notes are available to me all of the time, then I need to get my ears to be able to hear all notes as being acceptable. I guess like with cooking, yeah, I mean, it's quite a good example because, bless my mum and dad, they weren't very good cooks and everything was very, very bland. I didn't even know spices existed till I was an adult. And so it's a bit like finding out that spices exist and then experimenting. And sometimes you'll make something that's a bit too spicy. And And lots of times you'll come up with surprises and you'll go, wow, this tastes delicious. I didn't know that that combination of spices would work. So to explore all notes, I could just use a drone, just have a drone note. But to my mind, that's a bit more like practicing. And between you and I just don't like practicing. I don't want to practice. I want to be making music all the time. And so what I do is, I'm a looper. I'm a live looper. That's what I do. So I use my looper. But if you haven't got a looper, you can use backing tracks. I produce a lot of backing tracks that are of this ilk. What do I mean by that? I mean that chords and chord progressions that are really ambiguous, that really leave a lot of space open for a lot of different choices. The backing, it's the opposite of a backing that requires you to play only one thing. It is what I go for. Which really brings me to chord of the day. So it's actually simply an E7 sus, but I'd never used this fingering before. I've been enjoying today ripple picking up and down the strings because I'm using all 6 strings. So, for this loop, I was just playing 6, 5, 4, 3 strings and then moving to 5, 4, 3, 2 and then moving to 4, 3, 2, 1 and something almost harp-like about crossing all the strings like that. So, yeah, been enjoying this E7 sus. Let's play it for you right now. So, stretch, it is a stretch. I'm simply pushing down the 5th string at the 7th fret and the 4th fret of the 3rd string. All 6 strings are in the chord. We've got an E and an E, then we've got a D, then we've got a B and a B and an E. While I'm at it, I'll show you how I played that B sus chord. Very awkward fingering, I must confess. So I've got the 2nd fret of the 5th string, the 4th fret of the 4th string, and the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. I'm simply playing my inner 4 strings, the 5th, 4th, 3rd, and the 2nd. That's the root note, the 5th, the flat 7, and the open B string's also a root. It only contains the root E, the 5th B, and the flattened 7th D. So E, B, and D, and nothing else. The fact that we've only got the notes of E, B, and D means that we can choose from all of the other notes. There is no 3rd, there is no 4th, there is no 6th. So it means that there's a lot of space for a lot of choices. Today I've been pairing it with a B7 sus. So that only contains the root 5th and flat 7th of B, which are B, F sharp and A. I decided to put them on separate loops. Most of the time what I'll do is I'll create a chord progression and that will progress through the chords as per the progression. Today I've been enjoying just being able to play over that E chord for, maybe 16 or more bars before changing to the B. if a chord's playing for a long period of time, the longer it's playing, the less you need to be concerned about the context of the chord. Just as a thought experiment, if you think of any chord being played for 32 bars, it doesn't matter which chord came before it or which chord comes after it, because there's so much of it there. You can just treat it as if it's standalone. At the end of this video, what I'll do is I'll leave a recording of these loops for you to play over, and what I'll do is have a section, or have some sections where each chord is playing for quite a long time, 2 bars or more. I'll also do a bit where I switch between them quite quickly, so that you can get a feel for what that's like when, while you're playing over the E, you're needing to take into consideration the B. I hope that makes sense. My approach is to think about it as little as possible. I want to be listening really carefully, give myself permission to make mistakes. That is so important. I could do a video just on that, and I may well at some point. And simply to explore as widely as possible. Because these chords are neither major or minor, you can treat them as if they're dominant 7th chords or minor 7th chords. They have got a flat 7 in them. I guess if you're new to this, I'd avoid the major 7 note, but generally speaking, I'd say there are just no notes to avoid. Try playing with the coals. Play the E flat note and see how long you can sit on it before somebody slaps you. Anyway, so I'm not going to be thinking in terms of scales at all. Some people like to think in terms of scales. Sometimes I think in terms of scales, and I certainly analyze things in terms of scales. So I'm not anti-scales. For those of you who like to think in terms of scales, here's a list for you. I'm not going to demonstrate them for you today. I have in previous videos. I will in future videos. So try these. Try E Aeolian and B Phrygian. Then try E Dorian and B Aeolian. A bit spicier is E Phrygian and B Phrygian sharp 4. E Mixolydian and B Dorian. Try E harmonic minor and B Phrygian dominant. Or maybe E dominant flat 6 and B Dorian flat 2. E Lydian dominant and B melodic minor. Last but not least, because I do love Phrygian dominant mode at the moment, try E Phrygian dominant and B Dorian flat 2 with a flat 5. For those who, like me, are exploring playing by ear and not thinking in terms of scales, I recommend you locate the notes of the chord you're playing over. So I'm just going to demonstrate that now with this E chord, and so so that you understand what I mean. So just check this out. This is what I mean. So here I am fretting the 7th fret of my 5th string. That's a root. In my example of my E7 sus, that's the E, that's a root, there's a flat 7, there's a 5. Root, 5, flat 7, root. Root, 5, root, flat 7, 5. So if I'm going to improvise just in this area, I may go up here, we've got as well, sorry. Root, flat 7, 5. So I locate those, and then I know they're my safe spaces. They're my places I rush to if I'm suddenly going, oh my God, it's all going horribly wrong. So my approach is to use those notes, the notes that are in the chord that's playing at that time. They're my safe spaces. And I use those as islands of safety, and then dip my toe, try other notes. And whenever I solo and improvise, particularly when I'm on my own and I'm not live on camera, I'm looking to, the only thinking I'm doing is trying to ensure that I have explored every single note possible and got it in my ears. And gone, ooh, how's that feel? What do I think of that then? But as I say, try and think as little as possible. This approach I'm advocating is about training your ears and trusting your fingers. So here's a demonstration of me doing just that. I genuinely hope that you've found today's content useful. Please do like and subscribe. Please do leave a comment. That would be deeply appreciated. It really does help and support what I'm doing here. I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you'll join me. All the best.